Hello again, welcome to the second part of my little introduction to infrared photography. And I wanted to start by trying to demystify the whole subject, because I know some of you are concerned that it's quite technical and a bit involved. It doesn't have to be. The principle is very simple. You have a straightforward choice, and I'm going to suggest that the majority of people, certainly when you start out, will be using a conventional camera, more often than not a digital camera of some description, and you're going to fit it with an R72 filter. It's called an R72 filter because it blocks any light below 720 nanometers and only lets through anything above 720 nanometers. Don't be frightened by the nanometer thing. I've got a still that I can put up on screen for you now. Basically, the light spectrum goes from 380, which is visible light. 380 nanometers is visible light. That's what we can all see. Right up to 900 nanometers, which is pure infrared light. Anything in between gives you varying degrees of infrared images. So 380 nanometer are what we call full spectrum cameras. They are recording the whole gamut, the whole wavelength. Everything between 380 and 900, those cameras will record it. The higher up that scale you go, you can see that at 590 you've still got colour, quite a lot of colour. At 720, much less colour, and then at 900 you are photographing purely black and white. So you've got a band of nanometers within which you can set your camera, you can choose your camera if you like, to record infrared images. Now, with a conventional camera, unconverted, doesn't matter whether it's a DSLR or mirrorless, you're going to fit a 72 filter, R72 filter to it, which means that it's going to give you a little bit of colour, but nothing like as much as you would get with, say, a 590 or a full spectrum 380 camera. If you do decide to invest in a converted camera, then the advantage is that with a full spectrum camera, you then have the option of shooting conventional images, and your colours would be reproduced as we see them in reality. Or you can then fit different infrared filters, not just the R72. You can fit different infrared filters to obtain different colour effects. Now, I opted with the little Panasonic GF1 to go for a 720 nanometer conversion, which gives just a little bit of colour. I can play around with it in post-production and decide for myself what kind of effects I'm happy with. But I just wanted to give you that sort of basic overview. It's nothing to be scared of or frightened of in any way, shape or form. If you're going to use an unconverted camera with an R72, the biggest difference is going to be that you are going to be having to use your camera on a tripod, because your exposure times are going to be well in excess of 10 seconds, even on a bright summer's day. Two other points I want to just briefly mention. One is that you will need to check your lenses that you intend to use on your camera. Not every lens will work perfectly when it comes to recording infrared light, and I've already come across this. Some lenses generate what we call hotspots. Now, a hotspot is similar but not identical to getting flare. It's caused by either the optical construction of your lens, Sometimes it's down to the actual glass elements, sometimes it's down to the coatings on the elements, and on other occasions with other lenses it can be down to the black paint on the inside of the lens. And those two things can sometimes actually transmit and reflect infrared light inside the lens itself, and it generates a hotspot. And it's awkward because it's normally, I've come across it already, it normally appears as a circular spot right in the middle of the image. So that's something to be aware of. And also some of your lenses you may find refuse to focus in infrared photography. I've got one, the little Brighton Star 12mm, for some reason, and I just honestly can't work out what it is. It refuses to focus on infinity, and yet with visible light on my Olympus EM1 it works perfectly. So there are a couple of things you need to check out once you've gone and bought yourself a filter. Check your lenses, check focusing, see which ones generate hotspots. And then really that's when the fun starts, because you can take your camera out. I've chosen a rubbish time of year to do it because middle of winter is never a very good time. You do need good, bright, sunny days, preferably with nice cotton wool clouds, that kind of thing. And then you can really start to have some fun. But I did promise to show you how I process my images. Personally, I use Affinity Photo version 2. It's the same principle no matter what you use. Photoshop, Lightroom, anything. The principle is exactly the same, and it doesn't have to be complicated or mind-blowing. So having said all that, let's cut to the computer and I'll show you what I get up to. Well, here we are. I'm in Affinity Photo version 2. Not that the version makes any difference whatsoever. You can quite easily carry over what I'm doing to Photoshop, Lightroom. More or less any photo editing software will allow you to do everything that you need with your infrared images, but this is Affinity Photo version 2. And I'm just going to start off by opening an image, and it's one that I haven't worked on before, which probably means it's going to be rubbish. Here we are. It's a raw file taken in my local park a couple of weeks ago, and upright format, as you can see. Now my advice to you, and please, I need to emphasize this, my techniques with editing infrared are purely my own. There are dozens of ways you can go about this, and there are lots of more experienced YouTubers out there, so if you get hooked, you know, you'll soon find plenty of people on YouTube producing really detailed videos on the subtleties, if you like, of editing infrared. Anyway, enough of that, a disclaimer. My advice would be with any of your infrared images, start off by editing it in the same way as if it was an existing image. So exposure, contrast, that sort of thing. Once you're happy with them, then you can work on converting it to a more infrared looking image. So with this one, I'm very happy with the exposure. We've got detail everywhere, so I don't need to worry about that. All I'm going to do is to boost the clarity slightly. About 20%. And leave it at that. So with Affinity, the raw processor and pixel image processing side of the software package is all in one. If you're using Lightroom and Photoshop, then this is what you would be doing in Lightroom. By all means, correct me if I'm wrong. Before opening it in Photoshop. Well, in Affinity, all we do is change persona, as it's called. So at the moment we're in the develop module, the develop persona. If I click on it to say I'm happy to develop it, once we click on that, we are now taken into the photo persona. Now the photo persona is the equivalent to Photoshop basically, where we can introduce layers and do fine-tuning, if you like, to the image. So the first thing that I want to do is to rotate the image. Rotate it 90 degrees so we can look at it properly, and I'm going to give it a slight crop and just visually straighten out that apparently sloping lake. Crop in slightly to get rid of the unused image area. Okay, so I'm quite happy with that. Now we come on to making this look more like you would expect an infrared image to appear, and this is where we come into the already previously mentioned channel swap, which some people find scary. It isn't. It's very simple to do. I'm going to do it for you the long way round, if you like. You can create in Affinity a macro which will do it automatically for you, and in Photoshop you can assign an action to do the same job for you time after time, so you don't have to go through this set of steps. But it's really very, very straightforward. What we do is select a new adjustment layer, and we simply grab the channel mixer. And channel mixer by default, when you first open it, is highlighting the red channel, and all we need to do is to make red 0 and blue 100. So we can do that very simply: 0 for red, blue 100. And then we select the blue channel and do exactly the same thing. We reverse them, so blue now becomes 0 and red becomes 100. And now you can see we've got the beginnings of what you might think an infrared image would look like or should look like. It's all open to interpretation though, bear that in mind. Before I close down the channel mixer menu, I'll just emphasize the fact that sometimes, only sometimes, your blending mode can make a difference. At the moment you can see we're in the normal blend mode. There are other ones that you can at least have a look at to see what you think. With some images and some people's approach, one of these might suit you better. Possibly things like soft light or hue and saturation. I'm going to leave it in normal for the purposes of this video. Okay, and on the right hand side you can clearly see we've got our pixel layer, the original, and we've got our channel mixer adjustment. What I'm going to do next is to pick another adjustment layer, and this time I'm going to go for hue, saturation and luminance, HSL. You don't have to go down this route, but it's one that I find works in a lot of cases. And what I'm going to do is to select the cyanish color, click on the picker, and then change the saturation level and give that a bit more color. Now, one thing I need to emphasize is that when you start making these adjustments with infrared, it's very easy to sometimes go over the top and introduce artifacts and effects which are too obvious, if you like, in which case you just tone it down again, really. That's not too bad, it's not brilliant. Let's try the same thing with blue. Let's use the picker again. Yeah, now we're going into the magenta side of things, which I do not want. So you can see that these adjustments are simply affecting the sky area. Okay, I'm quite happy with that so far. Now I'm going to introduce the sort of pinky magenta cast which people associate with infrared images. So I'm going to pick the red channel and I will click on the foliage over here, and now when we increase that you can see that we are generating that lovely orangey red cast that people associate with infrared images. Now you don't have to use that, you can use any sort of colour that you want. I mean, I wouldn't go for a vibrant neon green. This is the sort of effect that people associate with infrared images, in which case absolutely fine to leave it like that. No problem with that whatsoever. You might find with some of your infrared images that you get noise creeping in, which is sometimes due to the actual subject matter, sometimes it's due to the processing. But noise is an inherent issue with infrared imaging. Of course you can dial that back and practically get rid of it completely in software these days as well, but that is just something to be aware of. So that's that particular image, and I'm now going to move on to a second one. Okay, I've changed software package now. This is an image which I have started to work on in Affinity simply by doing the first steps that we discussed with the image of the lake and pond, and I've done the channel mixer step, and now I've opened it in Nik Collection. I just wanted to give you a brief introduction to Nik Collection for those of you that don't use it or haven't heard about it. But Nik Collection, in particular Viveza, allows us to make more subtle changes if we want to, and more more extreme changes if we so wish. The first thing I'm going to do is I don't want to change anything globally with this image, and as you can see here, the sliders on the right hand side will change the overall look of the image, which at the moment I'm happy with. What I want to do is to make use of these things down here, control points. So we pick a control point and I'm going to put it in an area that I want to be blue, and you can see we are given a circle which we can either expand or reduce, and I want it to affect pretty much all of the sky. So something like that will do, and I then pick up the blue slider and we can increase the blue content up there in the top of the image. That's point number one. I will now introduce a second control point, and I'm going to put it on the grass down here in the foreground, and this time I'm going to increase the red, not so much the warmth, increase the red, decrease the green, and what I want to do is to carry this over to the rest of the foliage, if you like. So it's very simple. I can do a command, or if you're on a PC, a Control D to duplicate these points and put them all over the image where I want this colour to take effect. And we can build that up step by step. The good thing about control points is that you can turn them on and off so that you've got an idea exactly what you are doing. You can see up here now we have 4 control points so far, each one of which can be turned on and off by checking or unchecking these tick marks. And if you want to see the before and after, you simply uncheck the top box. So that's back to how it was when we first opened it, and that's with the corrections that we've made. I think it's better without those, to be perfectly honest. I am, however, going to add a control point down here, a small one, because I want to introduce some blue into this area in the foreground, just to emphasize the fact that it is actually reflected water. We could do the same across here in the lake itself, but it's such a small area that doesn't really worry me. You may also notice that some of the blue that I've increased up in the sky area is affecting the top of the old chimney stack, so in which case we would simply add another control point on here, small one, and we can reduce the saturation there, copy it just to make sure the next piece down isn't affected, something like that. And if you want to see the area which is being affected by those control points, then all you do is click on the mask icon here, and it shows you the area of the image which is being affected just by those control points. So this is one area of editing your infrared images where you can spend many happy hours tinkering with your images. And of course the other option, you do have presets down here, some of which may appeal to you. There's a lot of them. Of course you can go down the monochrome route, which is obviously another avenue that you can explore. And that's it. It doesn't have to be a long drawn out editing procedure. You can spend hours in front of the monitor tinkering around with images, probably more than I would do with conventional images, I'll be honest with you. You have so much flexibility, and in the case of my 720nm converted camera, it's a case of, do I stick with purely monochrome or do I try and generate some of that vibrant colour? But I hope you found that inspirational. That's asking a lot. I hope you found it informative, and maybe it's going to give you the push that you need to have a go with some infrared photography. It's a lot of fun, and depending on your choice of subject matter, that in itself will drastically change the way that your images look. But for the time being, I'm going to say enjoy your photography, whether it's infrared or conventional, and I'll see you very soon. Bye for now.